The end times, let me tell you what they actually are. They're a battle of two gods. But it's not going to be in the sky. It's going to be inside of you. Are we in the end times? I mean, is that perhaps what's going on? Are we too busy? Do we have too many neon lights distracting us? McDonald's burger in this hand and captivating advertisements looking through the eyes of a very distracted human being. There's a lot to focus on so that we can avoid the big picture. And perhaps it's time for a wake-up call. Perhaps we need to see that we are, in fact, living through the end times. But what are the end times? The end times are the times that precede a new age. I love the connotation towards the new age movement because that was really a spiritual movement that was hijacked. New age thinking, new age philosophy was all about preparation for a new time. But then it just went crazy. It went crazy with rules. It went crazy with restrictions that very much mimic what we're looking at now. So in fact, it was no different in the end to any other religion and to modern day thought, which seeks to really control what you think, control how you think, control what you think, control the narrative, only say things in a certain way, only feel things in a certain way, which really begins to kind of narrow the lens of where you are, and it puts you into a place of unrealness. The most powerful thing that we can do right now is get into authenticity. That's it. That's the most critical thing to do, is to really be where you are. And it sounds so simple, but who has the courage to really be where they are? And here's the crazy part about that question. Most people will unthinkingly raise their hand and say, me, got it, I'm there, without being honest enough to just take that moment of reflection. Well, am I? You know, I asked a question on Facebook the other day, something along the lines of, do you feel the need to impress other people? And if you didn't, would you be more free, perhaps? And so many people said, I don't need to impress anybody. I'm only here to impress myself, which is part of that new age philosophy. It's about saying the right words. But what underlies those words is in fact a lie, because we have a deep-seated fear of our own expression. So we hold back a lot from ourselves. See, we control, well, here's the interesting thing. We don't want to be controlled, and we don't appreciate the narrative being controlled. So we talk about that, right? That becomes part of our everyday conversation, where we say, for example, look at what mainstream media is doing. They're trying to control the narrative. Oh, so annoying. I hate it when people do that. Why do they want to control the narrative? Well, what is the external reality but a reflection of our inner world? So instead of trying to topple those who are controlling the narrative, we need to look at who's permissioning that behavior, which is us. At the very human level, we're controlling our own narrative in terms of trying to be in control of what we feel, to control what we say, to control what we think. So that means we're not allowing ourselves to be where we are as we are. Here we come back to that powerful but ignored theme of authenticity. And it's here where people go, oh, Kerry, so if I'm depressed, you just want me to succumb to the depression. You just want me to wallow in it. You just want me to dive into a pool of depression and stay there. That's not authenticity at all. Those are just distraction tactics. Authenticity is when you have the courage to face yourself and the humility to acknowledge where you are, because it's really difficult. When you step into true authenticity and you say, this isn't difficult, you're not doing it right. True authenticity is gut-wrenching. It's so real. It's so raw. It's going to take you deeper into yourself than you've ever been before. And this is what I was saying earlier. So many people will put their hand up and go, I'm honest, I'm authentic, I'm real, I'm all of these things, because they're good words to say. They sound excellent. And that's what we've become. We've become a society who is so obsessed with the external. How do I sound to myself even? Am I saying the right words? It's not just do I have the right look? You know, on a very superficial level, many people will still worry about that. But do I look good to myself? Is this the me that I want to portray? Forget whether it's real or not. Forget whether I buy into my own illusion or not. And ultimately, you know, a lot of those tactics, those old healing tactics that we employed about positive thinking all the way, those became very toxic, because what they did is they created a layer of unrealness, a layer of illusion even, for us to subscribe to. I put up a video on my channel fairly recently about reality creation, starting to dispel this myth that reality creation is all about ignoring the pain of where you are. It's actually about alchemizing the pain of where you are, which requires you to acknowledge the pain of where you are, which requires you to get really real, really raw, really authentic with where you are, so that you can infuse a higher reality into it and dissolve out the lower reality. That's a very quick explanation of what alchemy is. And by the way, if you want deeper level teachings from me, I do offer those in my online community, the Plasma Light Tribe. That's my very, very sacred space. That's where I teach the deeper work. Here on social media, it's my supreme joy to share with you all of this information for free. I put it right in front of you so that it can elevate you, and you can use this. You really can, to shift your life, to shift your consciousness, to get into authenticity with yourself. So how is this relevant to the topic that I'm talking about, which is the end times? Kerry, stop talking about authenticity. We want to know about the end times and end time prophecies. Well, it's very linked, because the end times, what do we know about them? We know that there are a time upon the planet where the dark was going to get very dark. In other words, where there would be evil roaming the streets. That's what we know about the end times. Now, I'm not talking about this from any religious perspective at all. Everyone has an upbringing. We've all been exposed to ancient mythologies or religious text, or even our beliefs of our ancestors that told us that we were going to walk through a crazy time on the world. And in this crazy time, people were going to act out, and they were going to act badly. They were going to be deviant to their true nature. And that's important to know, because the true nature of a human being is love. That's the true nature. We are in the process of exposing that within us which is not love. So these are the end times. The end times, let me tell you what they actually are. They're a battle of two gods. But it's not going to be in the sky. It's going to be inside of you. And do you know what I mean by that? There are two gods that created you. I know, this is where most people are going, what the hell is she saying? Okay. If you're familiar with my work, then you're familiar with the ARCHONS. Who are the ARCHONS? They're the engineers of the false matrix. What is the false matrix? It's the realm of illusion that we live in. It is a hologram, essentially. And most matrices are that, by the way. So it's not like a hologram is specifically wrong or bad. It's a necessary place that we come into in order to experience ourselves as individuated sparks of God. This is how we grow. This is how we evolve, which ultimately is how God grows and God evolves, because God too is an ever-evolving thing. But the beauty of the matrix that we're in right now is that we're waking up to how perverse it is. We're waking up to how distorted it is. We grew up thinking there's something wrong with me because I don't fit in. And now we've landed up going, oh no, maybe there's not actually anything wrong with me. Revelation of all revelations. Maybe it is the world. Maybe it wasn't me after all that was the weird one, or behaving in some kind of deranged way. Maybe the world is really backwards. Yes, because it's a false matrix. So those who engineered it, we call them archons. The archons are beings who were part of the original creation template. So when I refer to the original creation template, I'm talking about God's original creation, the divine matrix, also known as the organic universe. In the divine matrix, there were role players, aspects of God, who took on the role of light and those who took on the role of darkness. And we did this to catalyze each other. And I've often given this example. It's probably my best metaphor that I can use to explain God, what God is. God is not a singular being or a singular entity. God is... What are the words here? God is an entirety. And God is an entirety of love, a supreme perfection, a supreme divinity. But then you got to scratch your head and go, wait a minute, she just said that God's also evolving, but now she's saying God's perfect. Yes, that's the conundrum that God faced, which was, how does a perfect thing evolve? How does something who has already attained perfection ever move beyond that perfection? That is where creation came into being. It's as if, here's my analogy, it's as if you've got the most perfect chocolate cake that ever existed, but you want to make it more perfect, and you can't because it's already perfect. Done. It's a done deal. Yet there's something in you that's an overachiever, and you just really want to go beyond the spectacle that you've already made and somehow make this bigger, better, crazier, wilder, and more. So what you do is you say, well, because I can't perfect the recipe, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into its individual components. And I'm going to take the eggs and make them the eggiest eggs that ever they were. And I'm going to take the milk and the flour and all of my raw ingredients, and I'm going to perfect them. And I'm going to bring those as separate, individuated aspects into their highest, because what they can do at an individual level is different to what they can do as a combination. That's the perfect chocolate cake. It's the union of all things. Now, if I separate everything out into individual raw components and let them evolve and put them back together again, I'm going to create a whole new chocolate cake because my ingredients will have evolved. So this was the original creation template, but then those who undertook to take on the role of darkness went wayward. They got power drunk. They became psychopathic. They became so depraved through the influence of darkness that they eventually landed up believing, we don't need this God character. He's getting on my nerves, thinks he knows everything. But in fact, it's us. We do, because that's the illusion of darkness. So what they believed was that they were more supreme than God. You've got to marvel at the arrogance that it's going to take to come up with that kind of psychopathic thought, but that's essentially what the archons did. When they did that, they disowned God. And when they disowned God, they separated themselves from God. And when they separated themselves from God, they lost their ability to create. And all that they retained was their ability to engineer, but not create. When we engineer as human beings, we know very well what that is. That's a very mathematical process. We use equations and logic to create marvelous engineering feats. And the false matrix is, I wouldn't call it marvelous, but nonetheless, it's a feat of engineering performed at the level of a creator God, except a creator God who's lost their ability to create, because that's who the archons were. They were God-like beings overseeing darkness, because that's when God separated into these individual components. There were those that had to oversee light, and some of their names are the Elohim and the angelic and Melchizedek. These were beings who were tasked with holding light in focus, and equally there were those tasked with holding dark in focus. And initially and originally they were also of pure consciousness until, as I said, they became depraved and infected by the darkness that they were maintaining. They wanted to maintain the separation of darkness. That's ultimately what the false matrix is. It's the desire to maintain a separate world from God. We came into this separate world in order to restore it and return it back to the original creation template that it was hijacked from or taken out of. So these depraved psychopathic gods called the archons, they wanted to create a hybridized species, that's where you and I come in, who are partially of God's world, as in the original creator God, part of God's world, but also part of them, because they needed us to want the same things that they wanted, to see the world through their eyes. These became the gods in whose image we were created. So we have the gods in whose image we were created, and we also have the God in whose essence we belong and are a part of. So we have these psychopathic creator gods, and I say gods, you know, in inverted commas, gods with a little g, being the archons. They're the hybridization experts that brought humanity, the current humans that we see on the planet brought humanity into existence through hybridization programs. But all of us and all of them is a product of the one supreme creator of all that is. So we are the product of two gods, right? Within us, we have a huge dichotomy, because there is a part of us that is pure and loving and beautiful. And there is a part of us that wants to report for duty, wants to almost knee-jerk response, unconscious response, be a part of the little g gods world, the gods with a little g. And what does that look like? That looks like what we're seeing right now in the end times, where we're seeing people, for example, here, let me give you 3 examples. People who can't allow you to be where you are. So when people can't allow you to be where you are, what they are doing is they're trying to manipulate you into shifting your perspective, shifting what you think, shifting what you feel in order to suit them. Why? Because the creator gods, the archonic gods, they can't stand difference of opinion. They're very hive-minded. They're very one overriding narrative. You've got to be loyal to the one overriding narrative. And I said, I'm going to give you 3 examples. So can't allow people to be where they are, can't tolerate. And tolerate is a really, really strong word. Can't tolerate free expression. So it's kind of like an attack on creativity, on true creativity, because true creativity comes from the supreme creator God's world. That is who we all are as elements of the supreme creator. We are creative beings. And what's ironic is that the archonic little g gods, they don't enjoy creativity, yet they need it. They need it because that's how the false matrix is perpetuated. It's through our ability to create realities. Remember, they lost that. So these gods with a little g, they can't really tolerate creativity and they can't tolerate freedom of expression. They also can't ignore differences of opinion. They need to squash. They need to control. They need to override that individuality, that flourishing creative mind that humans have, which allows us to see things in very diverse ways. And it's through that diversity that growth can happen. So if you look back at historically how humans were, we were more lenient with each other in the sense that we allowed another person to be where they were. And if their opinion was different to ours, then we worked around that. We didn't disown someone because they were politically affiliated to a party that we didn't agree with. We didn't disown people because they liked talk show hosts that we believed were bad and wrong and evil. So we've become like the gods because we're made in their image. So that means we're imbued with their resonance and it sits inside our DNA. That's what we're trying to purify right now. That's what we're trying to throw off right now. And as we do, it comes into manifest form. It becomes reflected to us at the external level. It can no longer hide. When we're not in the end times, we don't see this. It's now at the end times that we see the division between the 2 gods, the wannabe gods and the true supreme creator God. That's that part within us that knows right from wrong, that doesn't act out, because it's not acting from pain. In fact, the true creator God will always just allow. That's what that supreme resonance does. You don't see the supreme creator God interfering in reality and say, well, that's okay and that's not okay. And you're allowed to think this, but you're not allowed to think that. And you can say this, but you can't say that, etc., etc. That supreme creator God is a God of allowing. And it's interesting because it's a question that so often comes up. Well, how could God allow this? How could God allow these travesties? Because if you're free to learn, if we're all free to learn, we will eventually return to the source of love that we come from, not because we're coerced to do that, but because we do that out of our own free will. And that is God's universe. It operates on the premise of free will. And then, of course, the gods with a little g, the archonic, psychopathic, depraved ones, what do? They don't allow. They force, they control, they manipulate. And we've taken so much of that way of being on without consciously seeing it and even without consciously differentiating between the 2 gods within us. So what we're being shown right now is alchemy. Alchemy looks like this. And that's why authenticity is what I spoke about in the beginning. Alchemy looks like this. We've got a low frequency, the archonic gods. We've got a high frequency, the supreme creator God. What have we been taught to do in the false matrix? To destroy, deny, resist, avoid, punish the stuff we don't like. An alchemist will not do that. An alchemist will bring that stuff closer. that which is uncomfortable, that which isn't favorable. The alchemist brings that closer. Why? Because that's the raw material of the alchemist. The alchemist sees energy for what it is. It is something that cannot be created or destroyed. Just like Einstein said, it can only be transformed. So the alchemist transforms the darkness, the density, into light by bringing the two together, by allowing those two to authentically meet without prejudice. In other words, without my prejudice, without me saying this is wrong and right, this is good and bad, this is punishable and that's commendable. An alchemist looks at both through the eyes of neutrality. And that's not apathy. Neutrality is simply, I'm going to allow these two essences to be. I'm not going to pit them against each other. I'm going to allow the density to be in the presence of light, which at a very practical level could mean my pain to be in the presence of my love. Do you know that we haven't exposed our pain to our love because we're afraid of love being tainted? We're afraid of showing the lightest light, the darkest dark, because we actually believe that somehow dark is going to diminish light when it's the other way around, and the alchemist knows this. And this is the foundation of my teachings. It's all about alchemy. Why? Because we at the foundational level are alchemists. We know how to transform. We've just forgotten. This is innate to us. When we welcome authenticity back online again. And authenticity says, here's two energies, the density and the light. I bring them together, I witness them through the eyes of neutrality, and they begin to do something amazing. They begin to merge into one higher frequency, not a diminished, a higher frequency, because the nature of light, you guys, this is so important. The nature of light is to evolve. The nature of light is to expand. So that means anything in the presence of light evolves into light. Do you see now why there's been an attack on the spiritual community, an attack on spiritual people to try to manipulate them through false teachings, misteachings, and short-sighted teachings to keep them from stepping into their light? Because that's the power of light. That's why the indoctrinations in our society, whether it's in pop psychology or the wellness world, or it doesn't even have to be about spiritual growth, just any kind of processing that's going to lead to emotional release work, it's all become very analytical, very mental realm stuff, so that we can control the narrative, so that people aren't exposed to the experience of their light, because that's alchemical in nature, and that dissolves out the density. That's what the archonic ones never wanted. They never wanted us to wield the power of our own light, or to know the power of our own light, because your light precedes you, it goes ahead of you, and it, not your brain, your light, it begins to alchemize darkness in its presence. So now, is it coming home for you? Are you seeing the bigger picture? What happens in the end times? Two gods pitted against each other. It's not really. It is the lower gods fighting for survival in the presence, in the alchemy of the presence of the divine true God. What's going to happen to them? They're going to become part of God again, and they know that, and they don't want that, and they're fighting to preserve their separation. They're fighting to not be absorbed into the light again, because they believe that their bitterness and their sorrow and their hatred makes them victims, gives them superpowers. Look at how we're seeing that perpetuated in so much modern day thinking. We're seeing people use their victimhood like a badge of honor. Now you owe me because my life has been painful and difficult. So I'm going to be offended at everything. You can't make fun of me. There's got to be special rules for how you speak to me, etc. That's the power of the archons. The archons see themselves pretty much in exactly the same light, just more aggressive. What they know, we're yet to discover. What they know is the human beings are so powerful because they're seeded from the ultimate creator, and they haven't disowned the ultimate creator God in the way that we, the archons, have. So that means that they have the power to dissolve us. We do. We do. They know that. The archonic ones know that. That's why at the end times, all the stops are put into reality to stop people, to prevent you from loving, to prevent you from experiencing the kindness and the healing power of kindness of another person. So much has been put into place to harden humanity's hearts, to turn them against their own true nature, to turn you against perhaps your family or your family against you. There's been a deep desire to break up the power of the family because the family is love. Do you guys know this? Somebody put a comment up. I mean, this was one of one of the most astounding comments I read, not in a good way. Astounding in the sense that somebody out there really believes this. Somebody leaves a comment for me going, Kerry, how can you be married and have children when that's exactly the paradigm that we are moving away from? And I replied, and I was like, we are not moving away from that. Maybe you are. I'm not. I'm moving towards my husband and my children and my family unit and finding strength in our love and in our unity. We first become whole as an individual unit, then we become whole as a family unit, then we become whole as a human unit. That's the natural order of things. The archonic influence is to divide, because obviously that's when human beings are weakened. That's what's taking place in our world right now. So in the end times, all of those measures are put into place to keep, for one thing, to keep you from knowing the power of your light, to keep you fighting against the dark, to keep, and that's also purposeful, to allow humanity to see darkness. It's purposeful because if we can see darkness, it makes us outraged. And if we get outraged, we start fighting against the stuff we're outraged about instead of delving into the depths of the beauty of who we are. But go back to what I said in the beginning about authenticity. That's part of the glue that unravels the spell of the illusory ones, who are the dark ones. They live in a world of illusion, and that's their superpower. Lies, smoke screens. So I want you to gravitate towards simplicity. I want you to gravitate towards ease. I want you to gravitate towards love. I want you to gravitate towards, does this feel good? I want you to gravitate towards, am I overthinking or underfeeling? And if I'm under feeling, it simply means I'm not rooted into my body where I feel things, and I've got to get more rooted in there and begin to discern who I am in the world by means of what it feels like inside the depths of my soul, and to connect with that inner wisdom. Again, in the end times, there is a war on to keep you in your mind. That's what the spiritual war is. It's the war to keep you locked in mental processing. Because when you're locked in mental processing, you're locked in the mental realm. When you're locked in the mental realm, you're locked in the false matrix. That's where the dark ones want you. The end times is literally those two creator forces that you are imbued with being alchemized within you into light. But to be alchemized, they're both going to come up, which means your light is going to get lighter. Your love is going to get deeper. Your compassion is going to grow. Your beauty is going to reach a level of divinity that you can't currently imagine. Equally, your wounds are going to come up. That's the dark getting darker. Your wounds are going to come up. Your desire to be a part of the masses where everybody is just going to finally leave you alone because you're not going to keep pushing against. You're not going to keep being the thorn in the side of a narrative who wants everybody mind wiped and brainwashed into one way of thinking. You're going to finally forsake your individuality and your creativity and just start agreeing with everybody else. Those two elements are showing themselves. They're showing themselves in each one of us so that we can see it, release it, alchemize it back into order, back into wholeness, out of chaos, into harmony. Your life is a very sacred thing. Did you forget that? And your heart is a deeply loving heart. And it's automated to love. It's always going to gravitate to love. So allow yourself to receive the love that loves you. To receive the blessings of a universe that supports you and holds you and wants you not to be harmed, but healed. I wish upon you The direct knowledge of the supreme power of your spectacular light. The direct knowledge. In other words, to feel your light. So from my heart, all the way into yours. Do you feel it? Do you allow it? Do you flow with it? Do you feel the ease that this opens up for you? Yeah, you've got this. Speak to you really soon. I'll leave a video for you just over here. You can go and explore this one next. Here I'm talking a bit more about ascension. You might want to check out that one. Bye-bye for now.